It's 6:30, and as usual, time for Look North, introduced by Harry Gration and Judith Stamper.
Tonight, Liverpool fans relive the horror at the Hillsborough inquiry.
The hidden treasures of York Minster, unearthed for posterity.
And is it a celebrity? Is it a pro? No, it's just Harry. Good evening. We start with the news that police in Derbyshire have launched a murder hunt after a motorist was found with gunshot wounds to the head. It's believed the motive for the attack was robbery. The man from Warrington was found by the A6 at Taddington near Buxton. He was on his way home from London, where he'd taken his wife for medical treatment. Alistair MacDonald reports.
The A6 killer struck in the early hours of yesterday morning. At dawn, Colin Grindley's car was spotted by a passing traffic policeman in a lay-by at Taddington Dale between Buxton and Bakewell. His body was found a few yards away in a small cave. Mr. Grindley had been robbed and shot through the head, in full view of the main road. He'd been returning from London, where he'd just delivered his wife for medical treatment. Is it likely he could have rendezvoused with someone at Taddington?
Our inquiries are not complete, but we have nothing to suggest that that was the occasion. I think it's, on the evidence available, more likely that he stopped for quite legitimate reasons to rest or, as I say, to relieve himself on a long journey from London to his home in Cheshire.
Dozens of policemen have been carrying out a minute search of the area where Mr. Grindley was murdered. But at the moment, senior officers are giving few details of what they've learned about his killer. And at an incident room in Buxton, detectives are logging information on a computer as they piece together Mr. Grindley's last hours. During the night, police questioned all drivers using this busy road between Buxton and Bakewell, and they say they've received some useful information. Although they can't be sure at this stage if more than one man was involved in the murder, they say they're reasonably certain that Mr. Grindley was not killed by a hitchhiker. Police say Mr. Grindley, who was a train driver, was a devoted family man with two young children aged 3 and 7 months. They say his murder appears to have no other motive than robbery.
Well, it is one of the most brutal circumstances you can imagine, that a man lawfully in the heart of the countryside has now been set upon, robbed and murdered. And really that's the most serious crime you can ever imagine, or have the misfortune to have to investigate.
Police are appealing to anyone with information to phone Buxton, that's 0298 3776. 0298 3776.
Liverpool football supporters have been giving vivid accounts of the Hillsborough disaster on the second day of the judicial inquiry. Several fans gave evidence describing the scene of horror in the stadium's Leppings Lane terrace. Some described how people who were desperately trying to escape the crush were pushed back into the stand. This report from Mike McCarthy.
As the fans gave their evidence today, a picture of a stadium in chaos began to emerge. One by one, the supporters described a lack of organisation from the second they arrived at the Sheffield Wednesday ground to the moments following the disaster itself. All of those giving evidence had arrived at the Leppings Lane end of the ground to find thousands of supporters trying to get inside the stadium with little control or guidance from police or stewards. Using a model set up at the inquiry, the fans described how they were carried through the turnstiles into a tunnel and then onto the already crowded terrace by the sheer pressure of people behind. Student Ian Clark was one of the many fans injured in the crush. He was discharged from hospital yesterday. He told the inquiry that one of the barriers broke and caused a surge forward. In front of me, he said, was a mass of bodies all entangled. I saw the body of a man lying face downwards, with the body of a little boy still on his shoulders. He went on to say, I saw several police officers pushing people back who were climbing up over the front fence. Keith Golding, whose uncle died in the crush, said the police didn't seem to understand what was happening.
At first, they were just staring into space. It was just blank looks everywhere. He was screaming and shouting at them, and it's as though they were oblivious to what was going on.
What's it been like for you, reliving the experience today?
It's hard to describe. I wouldn't say it's been hard to relive it, because in a way I don't really understand it. It's as though it hasn't happened, although it has.
What were your feelings as you were giving evidence?
I was shaken. I was a bit nervous, a bit worried. Just reliving it, it was a frightening experience.
Do you think you've recovered from the horror of it now?
I don't think so. I think that'll be with me for the rest of my life.
Another Liverpool supporter, Daniel Hennessy, said he passed out on the terrace and came round in hospital. His T-shirt was covered in footprints.
I am very lucky to be here. There is no doubt about that. I know how close I thought at one point I was dying. So I am very lucky to be here.
The inquiry heard today that some people on Merseyside felt it would be a whitewash because police officers had been assigned the task of gathering statements. But solicitor Peter Jackson, who was at Hillsborough and is representing the Supporters Association at the inquiry, says he's satisfied the proceedings so far have been fair.
An investigation has been launched into deaths and illnesses in the Armley area of Leeds, which are thought to be connected with deadly asbestos poisoning. The study, commissioned by Leeds City Council, will pinpoint the level of chest cancer among people who were connected with the J.W. Roberts asbestos factory in Canal Road before it closed in the 1950s. With this report, here's Nick Wood.
The Roberts factory manufactured asbestos sheeting and panels before it closed down almost 30 years ago. The new study will examine cases of people living around the plant and who worked inside who have suffered from mesothelioma, a rare and incurable chest cancer, which is nearly always caused by contact with asbestos. Those who've campaigned for an investigation claim the legacy of medical problems caused by the factory are widespread. At one time, women from the communities of South Kirkby and Moorthorpe near Pontefract were bused to their jobs at Roberts's every day. Since then, it's claimed, many have died as a direct result of asbestos-related diseases. One of them was a former mayoress of the towns. Irene Barrett died last year following a 2-month illness. She worked in the factory from 1941 until 1944, handling boiler covers. Evidence from experts at the London Chest Hospital says her case of mesothelioma was almost certainly caused by her time spent working at the factory. Her husband says there are many more like her.
I'm satisfied with anything that will prove the enormity of this, because I feel that the people, the council, in fact the medical authorities in Leeds, they're unaware of the enormity of this catastrophe, which it is. You see the quote in 20, 30 deaths, you know. The MP quoted 22, 23 in the House of Commons. There are hundreds and hundreds. I have a list here from ladies from my village here. There are almost 50 dead from my little area here, you know. So please, I wish someone would grasp the enormity of this catastrophe, because it is a terrible catastrophe.
The doctor in charge of the City Council's study says she wants to contact as many people as possible who might have suffered problems.
I think it's important to establish the size of the problem, because a number of people in Leeds are concerned about it. I must say again that it is a rare tumour, so it will be a small number of people who are affected, but obviously it's very important to them if they develop this disease. So we're trying to see the scale of the problem, and I think that that's as far as we can go at the moment.
News of the study has been welcomed by Armley's MP, who says it might help families involved in legal action.
It's not the case that everybody that lived in the area would be suffering as a result of it, nor is it the case that everybody who worked there. There are some test cases for families being put together now by lawyers that will take this company on in court, and it will be supportive evidence there, obviously.
Despite the study, many who are likely to be included in its findings now want to see a government inquiry. Only then, they say, will the full extent of the suffering caused by the Armley asbestos become known.
Detectives investigating a missing Derbyshire 16-year-old believe he may have been out running when he vanished more than a week ago. There's been growing concern over the safety of Michael Bolton, who has a mental age of 12. Sue Crabtree reports.
It's now 9 days since Michael went missing, and his disappearance has baffled police. They've searched every property in the village of Eyam where Michael lived with his foster parents, but there's been no trace of him. They know he left the Miners' Arms pub, where he worked cleaning glasses, at about 3:10 on May the 8th, and he was seen wearing a T-shirt and shorts in the nearby village of Stony Middleton about 20 minutes later. He's a keen fell runner, and police now believe he may have been out jogging. They think he ran along the B6521 from Eyam, then turned left through Stony Middleton to Carver, left again onto the B6001 towards Grindleford, then onto New Road and back to Eyam. He has an unusual and exaggerated arm movement when he's running, and this was one of his favourite routes through the countryside. Meanwhile, 60 officers and park rangers were again out searching today, while colleagues at base went back through files of missing, abducted and murdered children in the hope of finding a pattern. They're hoping someone may have seen Michael running and can provide a clue which will lead detectives to him.
Douglas Hogg, the Minister dealing with prisons, has stated in a parliamentary written answer that the B Wing of Hull Prison will continue to be used for young prisoners on remand. This is in spite of the opinion of a judge that the wing is unsuitable for such prisoners. Michael Welsh had asked the Minister what action he proposed to take in view of a report by Judge Stephen Toomim that B Wing was not a place for an unconvicted prisoner under the age of 21. Mr Hogg replied that there was no feasible alternative at present.
Scunthorpe detectives investigating a huge fire which gutted an unoccupied mill in Brigg yesterday afternoon are questioning 3 juveniles. The 3 were taken into custody this morning. A file is being prepared for the Crown Prosecution Service. The old Yarborough mill in Bridge Street was gutted in a fire on Monday afternoon. Firemen were called from all over the county to tackle the blaze. All roads in the area are now open.
Police in West Yorkshire are helping in the search for 2 men who've escaped from a Lancashire prison. Glenn Taylor, who's 21 and from Leeds, was one of the prisoners who escaped from Wymott Jail at Leyland in Lancashire. The other man, John Killey, who's 23, is from Preston. Both were serving sentences for burglary. A police spokesman said they'd forced the cell bars to get out.
Stukely Hall at Holbeach has been given a reprieve by Mr Nicholas Ridley, the Secretary of State for the Environment. The hall dates back to the 17th century and has been used as an old people's home for the past 40 years. The County Council want to pull it down and build new houses on the site, but the government now say there must be a planning inquiry.
In Leeds Crown Court today, a Home Office pathologist used a plastic skeleton to show the jury the injuries he found when he examined the remains of a boy buried 26 years ago. Stephen Jennings, who was killed by his father, William, when he was 3 years old, had 8 broken ribs and 2 fractures to his left forearm. William Jennings, 51, now of Loke Road, Albretton, near Wolverhampton, denies the toddler's murder, but has admitted manslaughter. The trial continues.
Sonia Sutcliffe, estranged wife of the Yorkshire Ripper, today claimed libel damages at the High Court in London for false allegations in Private Eye that she signed a £250,000 deal with the Daily Mail for her story. Mrs Sutcliffe, who's 37, of Heaton in Bradford, is suing Press Dram, the publishers of Private Eye, over 2 articles about her alleged deal with the Daily Mail. In its defence, Private Eye doesn't claim that Mrs Sutcliffe made any deal, but denies that the articles were defamatory.
Roy Chadburn, the president of the National Union of Mine Workers in Nottinghamshire, is being forced to quit because of pit closures and falling membership. His job is to disappear as part of a programme of cuts among NUM officials. John MacLeod reports.
Down for the simple reason.
Ray Chadburn has spent 40 of his 55 years in the mining industry, from a 15-year-old boy at Welbeck Colliery to the NUM president of the Nottinghamshire Miners in 1979. In those days, he had enough support to stand against Arthur Scargill in the elections for the national president. But that support crumbled during the miners' strike. Nottinghamshire miners had voted against the strike. Mr Chadburn urged them to support it. They might argue that it was he who ended up on the scrap heap. Nottinghamshire miners felt their leaders weren't reflecting their views during the strike and ousted them in favour of the UDM. And when the strike was over, the UDM moved into Mr Chadburn's office and locked him out.
I'm sorry, I've had instructions not to let you in.
Mr Chadburn is one of the longest-serving NUM area officials. 10 years ago, the NUM had about 35,000 members in Nottinghamshire. They've been reduced to about 4,000 today, following the union split and pit closures. Axing Mr. Chadburn's job brings the number of union officials more into line with the number of members. Today, Mr. Chadburn said he's still got a job to do. It is too soon to talk about retirement.
The region's two main water authorities said today it was highly unlikely they'd be able to meet the Common Market's 1993 deadline for bringing drinking water up to European standards. This follows last night's government defeat in the Lords, when an amendment bringing the UK in line with other EEC countries was passed. The government does have the power to reject the Lords' amendment, which is already being seen as a major blow to plans to privatise the water industry. Jeremy Hibbard reports.
The government's defeat in the Lords effectively means that the water authorities must bring forward the date by which drinking water complies to European standards. Yorkshire Water has already embarked on a major programme of rebuilding its water treatment works, including, in some cases, replacing the old cast iron mains. The programme is due for completion by 1995. Today, Yorkshire Water said that most of its supplies already comply with the European Drinking Water Directive. The company says it's working on improving the taste and appearance of those that don't. And a spokesman for Anglia Water said it would be impractical to achieve European standards by 1993. This was because of doubts about the construction industry's capacity to carry out the necessary work. Today, Labour's water spokesman, the Dewsbury MP Anne Taylor, rejected the water authority's claims. She says the government should make sure they stick to the European directive.
I think that we've waited long enough to bring our water quality up to European standards, and I hope that the government isn't going to force more delay, because a lot of people in this country, about 11 million people, are drinking substandard water, and unless the government acts quickly, then there's no prospect of that situation altering. So I hope this amendment will stay part of the bill.
The government has yet to decide whether it will overturn the Lords' amendment of its bill. If it does not, the authorities will have to rethink their strategies, the government its privatisation plans.
Now here's a chance to pick up a bargain and really impress the neighbours. We're offering you the opportunity to buy something that'll really stand out in the garden. In fact, it'll have to, because there certainly won't be room for it in the garage. Clarence Mitchell, now there's a bargain, reveals all.
Walk into Wright's car sales in Hull and you'll find more than the low-mileage saloon or estate that you may have been bargaining for. For tucked away at the back is this used model, a former RAF Varsity. This tidy example, a Royal Navy Sea Prince. Both of them good runners in their day. Some bodywork will be necessary, but full logbooks are available.
We're just starting off to buy aeroplanes to resell them to the public. Initially it was for private collectors we thought would be the buyers of them, but it now seems to be opening up into a new world of theme parks and people may be interested in buying to make into restaurants, etc. like that.
Surely if someone's coming in to buy a Ford Escort, what's their reaction when they see these things here?
Well, they're quite amazed. They wonder how the hell they got in, because she's a fairly big plane, is the Varsity, so yeah, it does amaze them how they got in here.
What do you say to them?
Well, we just say that we're now into aeroplanes as well as cars. Would you like to buy an aeroplane?
With the interest shown by firms and collectors so far, the company is aiming to expand. It's planning to handle army vehicles, and with the closeness of Hull docks, maybe even the odd Navy warship.
Rugby news now, and it's been announced that Sunday's record crowd for the Rugby League Premiership finals produced record receipts of £262,000. Hull will receive £68,000 and Sheffield Eagles £34,000 as their share of the gate.
Now we've got some cricket news, and it's disastrous news for Yorkshire, I'm afraid, in their game against Northants. Here it is. Yorkshire 191, Metcalfe 49, Robinson 46, Northants 113 for 2 after 45 overs. Now, 2,000 years ago of York's history went on display today with the opening of York Minster's newly refurbished foundations. The Minster's major archaeological remains have been displayed beneath the Minster since the early 70s, but it's only now that they're being seen in their full glory. Clarence Mitchell has been to view them.
In its time, the site of York Minster has been occupied by the Romans, the Saxons and the Normans. The Romans used it as a fortress, the Saxons as a cemetery. It was the Normans who established a cathedral.
20 years ago, during extensive foundation work, major remains were found. They led to the opening of the undercroft beneath the Minster's main tower. The area is dominated by the new foundation stones and securing rods. For many years, the remains were displayed there. A refurbishment was planned 5 years ago, but the famous South Transept fire, caused by lightning in 1984, delayed the plans. Today, though, the refurbishment of the undercroft is complete. It's now open to the public. The New Look foundations contain new models and new exhibits. Civic dignitaries and Minster staff were there this morning for the formal opening.
We felt that with certain changes like lighting is one of the main things we've done, more models, more visual explanation and a slightly shorter text, we thought the whole thing would come alive rather more obviously for a person who just comes down and wants to know what they're seeing.
We've got the Roman Principian building, which is at 45 degrees to the Norman Cathedral, and then the Norman Cathedral in turn being overbuilt by the present Minster, and then looking all around us here, we've got these great masses of concrete which are holding the present building up. And you almost need to have a ball of wool to go around the Minster to go around the lower level in the first place. So the really idea all the time was to try and let people understand where they were at any one point. The top of the concrete foundations just so happened, with a bit of luck, to be at the same height as the level of the ground at the time the Norman Cathedral was built.
Well, this, of course, is the very centre of the city's history, where the Roman headquarters was and where the church has always been. And what's on display here enables one to actually get to the heart of things in terms of the development of York. It's a most exciting place where the evidence still survives and people can now see it in marvellous conditions. So I'm sure it's going to be, once again, one of the great tourist draws of the city centre.
Now then, to recap on this evening's main stories. 100,000 demonstrators have now gathered in Tiananmen Square in Peking as the protests for democratic reform escalate. 2 High Court judges have rejected claims that the government's leaflet explaining the community charge is politically biased. A murder inquiry has been launched in Derbyshire after a man was found shot in the head at Taddington near Buxton. And Liverpool football fans have told the Hillsborough disaster inquiry that spectators trying to climb out of the crush were pushed back into the stand.
Now let's have a look at the region's weather. And tonight's weather slide was kindly sent in by Marjorie Roberts, who lives in Bramley, Leeds, and it shows Roundy Park Gardens. Tonight, a fine sunny evening and a dry, clear night is expected over much of the region, though the far south, South Lincolnshire and Norfolk, will be rather cloudy at times. Tomorrow, Wednesday, will continue dry, but with more in the way of cloud. Temperatures, if anything, will be higher, reaching a warm 19 Celsius, 66 Fahrenheit. Light winds, mostly west or southwest, with sea breezes developing on the coast.
Right, and we'd like to end the programme tonight with some of the world's top golfers on show. We'd like to, but we can't. Instead, we settle for some of the country's best-known entertainers trying to play golf on Baildon Moors. It was all for charity, Bradford's War on Cancer campaign. Ken Cooper reports.
38 teams took to the links, each led by a celebrity from the fields of sport, television and the stage.
Oh, he likes me, this guy.
Some of the amateurs were a great deal better than some of the stars, but nobody minded. It was all for charity. Now here's a familiar face taking the morning off from the BBC to play with the Yorkshire television team. Hope no one gets to hear about it.
Go on, yeah! Brilliant. You might damage it.
You got that, did you? We did, Harry, we did. It's a peculiar game, golf, and one I don't quite follow. Why, I wondered, do people bother?
Charlie, you're the intellectual. Because we're barmy. It's as simple as that, hitting a little ball and then going and finding it. It's intriguing.
Takes your mind off the hard grind of showbiz, doesn't it? I've been told to say.
Hey, I like that, Ed. I like that. No, it's healthy. It's competitive. It's
Keeps
just
me
something-
fit.
It's just something that you want to do, and you want to do well. I'm not saying we do well, but we want to do it well. And as Eddie says, it's complete different from the show business field.
Yeah. How's your play coming on, Eddie?
I am playing brilliant at the moment. At the moment, when I get other golf clubs in my hand and the golf balls, it might be different. But at the moment, up here, because golf is played up here, you see, and at the moment I'm playing brilliant up here. But when it gets transferred to here, no, I can't play golf, me.
You were playing yesterday, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've knocked my golf down to 5 times a week now because my wife was starting to complain.
Wrong way.
After a few practice swings, Charlie tees off and makes a right mess of it. It was, luckily, as he told himself, all for charity.
Oh, it's rough.
Yeah, it was a good course. By the way, it's the first time I've ever been sponsored by Yorkshire Television, which shows that they do show extraordinary good taste sometimes, or as one of their executives told me, they just felt sorry for me, from both of us. Good night.
Good night.